Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Wiegers, Editor-in-Chief of Copper Canyon Press, and I'm coming to you live from my home office here in Port Townsend, Washington, which is a small city located on the Salish Sea on Sklallam land. And I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. We're getting ready for a live reading with Lambda Literary Award winner Ellen Bass, Pulitzer Prize winner JERICHO Brown, and National Book Award winner Arthur Z, who've all joined us here to help us raise some funds for Copper Canyon Press. As you may know, Copper Canyon is a nonprofit independent book publisher, and we're entirely dedicated to poetry for almost 50 years now. Rather than listen to me tell you about what I love about the Copper Canyon community, we're going to share a bit more about what makes us unique from the perspective of our many authors, since they can say it much better than I can. Here's a short video, and then we'll get to the reading.
What I love about working at Copper Canyon Press is that everything we do is poetry. Even our business cards have lines from poems we published. And I know you probably can't read this, but it's a line from JERICHO Brown's A Tradition, which just won the 2020 Pulitzer Prize in Poetry. It goes,
I begin with love, hoping to end there. I'm really happy to be a part of the Copper Canyon Press family. When I came to Copper Canyon, I understood that I was coming to a press that would hold my hand through the ways that my books can face the world, and a press that would walk with me to make sure that my books would indeed say directly what I mean for them to say. I'm very grateful. I'm also very glad to be a part of a press that is the home for one of my best friends, the poet Ellen Bass, who really looks at the condition of heartbreak and how it can be healed in our lives. She has this one line. It goes something like,
"You may have to break your heart, but it isn't nothing to know even one moment alive." It's an honor to be published alongside Copper Canyon poets like Victoria Chang. She writes about life and death with riveting precision. I thought I knew the territory of love and death, but then she writes,
"To love anyone means to admit extinction. I tell myself this so I never fall in love, so that the fire lights just me." I love Copper Canyon Press because of how it shines a light on so many different kinds of writers, from new poets to well-known poets such as W.S. Merwin to contemporary geniuses such as Richard Zeichen. He writes beautiful lines like,
"The hand is a voice that can sing what the voice will not, and the hand wants to do something useful. Sometimes at night in bed, before I fall asleep, I think about a poem I might write someday about my heart," says the heart. If we have to keep our distance, at least we have poems as a way of spanning the divide. I've been reading poems by my friend Dana Levin, like this one, Urgent Care, which could be a ballad for what we're going through right now.
We really need you to take care of this. We really need you to care for this, to care about this. We really need you to peer through the clinic's storefront window on alert for the ballyhooed moon. We really need you, Copper Canyon Press. We need you to keep publishing poetry. So many of the poets that I read, that I go to feed my soul, are Copper Canyon Press poets.
I get to have my name and my books stand alongside names like W.S. Merwin, Lucille Clifton, Pablo Neruda, beloved poets.
help us keep thriving, keep publishing poetry, and keep going through this crisis and far into the future.
Thank goodness for Copper Canyon.
Thank goodness for poetry.
Copper Canyon Press is poetry.
This is Ketchup, and we love Copper Canyon Press.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for donating. We understand that where your money is where your heart is. Your heart is with poetry, and we really appreciate it. Thank you for reading poetry. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. You're all going to have an opportunity to make a gift to Copper Canyon Press to help us continue to thrive through the current economic crisis and beyond. And when you do make a donation, I want to announce right now that we're offering a limited edition book that at this point is only available to our donors. I'll tell you more about this at the end of the evening, but for now, I'll let you know that it's called The World Has Need of You, named for an extraordinary Ellen Bass poem by that title. And it's an anthology of poems of connection, originally gathered by our team when the pandemic first hit. We're living in extraordinary times, and in these poems, we hope to share some of the writing that we've turned to as we contemplate and engage the present moment. So we're offering this anthology to you tonight, and thanks for your donation. Poetry has sustained Copper Canyon Press for nearly 50 years, and in reading this book, we hope you will agree that poetry will continue to guide us in the future. So if you've just joined, I want to welcome you. You've tuned in to our virtual benefit for the future of Copper Canyon Press, and I'd like to go ahead and welcome our first reader. It's my immense pleasure to introduce to you Ellen Bass, whose most recent book, Indigo, was published just this spring. In addition to Indigo, Ellen is the author of several award-winning books, including Like a Beggar and The Human Line. Her poems regularly appear in The New Yorker and other esteemed publications. And her best-selling book, The Courage to Heal, has been a guide to survivors of abuse since it was first published in 1988. Personally, I've had the great pleasure of working with Ellen over 3 books now, but I first read her work when, in my 20s, I encountered her groundbreaking feminist anthology of poetry, No More Masks. Through her advocacy, outreach, activism, and poetry, Ellen has helped countless thousands of people, and personally, I consider her work foundational in my own development as a reader and an editor. As with each of the poets reading today, she's beloved by all of us at Copper Canyon Press. Ella, welcome. Ellen, welcome, sorry.
I'm very happy to be here. It's an honor. I'm just thrilled to be reading with Jericho and Arthur, and thank you so much, Michael. Copper Canyon Press is my home, and it's just great to be with all of you who are listening in. I'm so glad to be able to share poems with you during this very rough time. The small country. Unique, I think, is the Scottish tartle, that hesitation when introducing someone whose name you've forgotten. And what could capture cafuné, the Brazilian Portuguese way to say, running your fingers tenderly through someone's hair? Is there a term in any tongue for choosing to be happy? And where is speech for the block of ice we pack in the sawdust of our hearts? What appellation approaches the smell of apricots thickening the air when you boil jam in early summer? What words reach the way I touched you last night, as though I had never known a woman? An explorer, wholly curious to discover each particular fold and hollow, without guide, not even the mirror of my own body. Last night, you told me you liked my eyebrows. You said you never really noticed them before. What is the word that fuses this freshness with the pity of having missed it? And how even touch itself cannot mean the same to both of us, even in this small country of our bed, even in this language with only 2 native speakers. This next poem is called Ode to Zeke, and it's a love poem to my departed dog Zeke, and I wrote it for him when he was close to death. Ode to Zeke. O breathing drum, O cask of dark waters, O decaying star, my barking heart, my breaking brother, what will seep into the space your body leaves? Oh, huge 18-muscled ears, oscillating ossicles and cochlea, your busy canals, now hollow caves of quiet. I have said your fur is black, but you are silvered, rhymed with frost. You are the new moon. You are light in the dark house. How long will I see your shadow? Oh, heavy hunk of existence. Oh, great flank I have rested my head upon when I was too weak for human touch. Sleek, leading man, you debonair dog. How people on the avenue stopped to swoon. Oh, splaying legs once faster than rabbits, canines slashing flesh, urgent thug, unstoppable thrust. Oh, happy snapping at the wind. What do you remember now that you are mudslide? Glacier melting, cliff collapsing into the sea. I have memorized your milky breath, your ballet leaps and whirligigging, your princely patience as the children dressed you. Soccer, Zeke, in jersey and shorts, one paw on the ball. Snorkel, Zeke, with mask and fins. Bar mitzvah, Zeke, in a yarmulke and my father's silk talit. Oh, my text of decrepitude, my usher to death, companion of 10,000 years. I'll fry you a fish. I'll sit by your bowl. Eat from my hand. I have nowhere to go. This next poem I wrote as part of a project called New Voices, where writers were asked to write poems or essays, some kind of response, in response to visual images from the Holocaust. And this is called Photograph. And the name of the photograph that I was given to write a response to is Jews probably arriving to the Woods Ghetto circa 1941 to 1942. Why is a horse here alongside the train? Two horses, yoked with leather harnesses, light silvering their flanks in the midst of the Jews descending. Where is the driver taking the cart loaded with wooden planks? What is in the satchel that weighs down the arm of a woman in a dark coat, her hair parted on one side? A woman I could mistake for my mother in the family album, only my mother was in Philadelphia, selling milk and eggs and penny candy, because her mother escaped the pogroms, a small girl in steerage crying for her mother. What are the tight knots of people saying to one another? A star burns the right shoulder blade of each man, each woman. Light strikes each shorn neck and caps each skull. No one is yet stripped of all but a pail or a tin to drink from and piss in. Dread, like sun, sears the air and breaks over the plains of their faces. Light clatters down upon them like stones, but we can't hear it. Nor can we hear blood thud under their ribs. They will be led into the ghetto and then will be led out to the camps. But for now, the eternal now, the light is silent, silent the shadows in the folds of their coats. The bones of the horses are almost visible. Their nostrils are deep, soft shadows. And the woman, who could be, but is not my mother, still carries her canvas bag and, looking closer, what might be a small purse. And I'm going to end with the title poem, Indigo. As I'm walking on West Cliff Drive, a man runs toward me, pushing one of those jogging strollers with shock absorbers so the baby can keep sleeping, which this baby is. I can just get a glimpse of its almost translucent eyelids. The father is young, a jungle of indigo and carnelian tattooed from knuckle to jaw, leafy vines and blossoms, saints and symbols. Thick wooden plugs pierce his lobes, and his sunglasses testify to the radiance haloed around him. I'm so jealous, as I often am. It's a kind of obsession. I want him to have been my child's father. I want to have married a man who wanted to be in a body, who wanted to live in it so much that he marked it up like a book, underlining, highlighting, writing in the margins, I was here. Not like my dead ex-husband, who was always fighting against the flesh, who sat for hours on his zafu, chanting Om, and then went out and broke his hand punching the car. I imagine when this galloping man gets home, he's going to want to have sex with his wife, who slept in late, and then he'll eat barbecued ribs and let the baby teethe on a bone while he drinks a dark beer. I can't stop wishing my daughter had had a father like that. I can't stop wishing I'd had that life. Oh, I know, it's a miracle to have a life, any life at all. It took 8 years for my parents to conceive me. First there was the war, and then just waiting. And my mother's bones so narrow, she had to be slit and I airlifted. That anyone is born, each precarious success from sperm and egg to zygote, embryo, infant is a wonder. And here I am alive. Almost 70 years and nothing has killed me. Not the car I totaled running a stop sign or the spirochete that screwed into my blood. Not the tree that fell in the forest exactly where I was standing, my best friend shoving me backwards so I fell on my ass as it crashed. I'm alive, and I gave birth to a child. So she didn't get a father who'd sling her onto his shoulder, and so much else she didn't get. I've cried most of my life over that. And now there's everything that we can't talk about. We love, but cannot take too much of each other. Yet, she is the one who, when I asked her to kill me if I no longer had my mind, we were on our way into Ross shopping for dresses. That's something she likes, and they all look adorable on her. She's the only one who didn't hesitate or refuse or waver or flinch. As we strode across the parking lot, she said, "Okay, but when's the cutoff? That's what I need to know." Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. That was beautiful as always. I realized that at the start I forgot to say how you tend to write slowly. A book maybe every 7, 8, even 10 years, and I'm always greedily impatient and trying to pull poems out of you. And I just want to point out to everyone that we've done 3 books together, and they're all pretty darn skinny books. And Ellen just works them until she's absolutely confident in them, and just I think that shows in the work. And I just love working with you and love hearing the poems every time. So I'm going to move to our next reader, JERICHO BROWN, whose most recent collection is The Tradition, and it won the Pulitzer Prize this year in poetry, which was just announced last month. JERICHO is the author of 3 books of poetry, including Please, The New Testament, and The Tradition. A recipient of a Whiting Award, a Guggenheim Fellowship, and the Anisfield Wolf Book Award. JERICHO is also the poetry editor of The Believer magazine. He's something like, quadruple threat. When he first sent me some poems, from what would eventually become the new manuscript. He sent me some duplexes, and I could tell that he was on fire and just a little bit possessed by this form that he was making and these new poems he was writing. So when I finally read the manuscript, the whole manuscript for the tradition, it was undeniable that JERICHO had written an extraordinary book. Not only did the tradition win the Pulitzer Prize, but it was a finalist for the National Book Award and the National Book Critics Circle Award. And were there other major awards in poetry, I'm confident he would have been atop those lists as well. JERICHO's the director of the creative writing program at Emory University in Atlanta, which I've been told by someone, I can't remember whom, is the best MFA program in the country. He's also a terrific card player who's taught me how to actually win at cards. And now I'm hoping that he can also teach me to have a similarly beautiful laugh as he does. JERICHO, we love having you among our family, and it's great to have you here tonight.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you, Michael. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to Copper Canyon and to Michael Wiegers for being my editor, and for everyone's patience with me in particular. Michael, you shouldn't tell people that I'm good at playing cards, because then everybody's gonna want to play us in cards, and I don't really feel like whooping all the tail. And Emory University does have the #1 creative writing program for undergraduates. So we don't have an MFA program. So I'll read some poems. Jenna is doing our closed captioning. She's showing you the name of the poem, and I got a request to read a poem that I did not give to her in advance. So hopefully I'll be able to let y'all know when that happens. I'll probably skip out on one and add this other one in. Prayer of the Backhanded. Not the palm, not the pear tree switch, not the broomstick, nor the closest extension cord, not his braided belt, but God, bless the back of my daddy's hand, which, holding nothing tightly against me and not wrapped in leather, eliminated the air between itself and my cheek. Make full this dimpled cheek, unworthy of its unfisted print, and forgive my forgetting the love of a hand, hungry for reflex, a hand that took no thought of its target, like hail from a blind sky, involuntary, fast, but brutal in its bruising. Father, I bear the bridge of what might have been a broken nose. I lift to you what was a busted lip. Bless the boy who believes his best beatings lack intention, the mark of the beast. Bring back to life the son who glories in the sin of immediacy, calling it love. God, save the man whose arm, like an angel's invisible wing, may fly backward in fury, whether or not his son stands near. Help me hold in place my blazing jaw as I think to say, excuse me. This next poem is titled after a word Southerners use for a person and everyone you associate with that person. That word is nim. Sometimes it's anim, depending on where you are. Sometimes it's just nim. Nim. They said to say goodnight and not goodbye. Unplugged the TV when it rained. They hid money in mattresses, so to sleep on decisions. Some of their children were not their children. Some of their parents had no birth dates. They could sweat a cold out of you. They'd wake without an alarm telling them to. Even the short ones reached certain shelves. even the skinny cooked animals too quick to catch. And I don't care how ugly one of them arrived. That one got married to somebody fine. They fed families with change and wiped their kitchens clean. Then another century came. People like me forgot their names. I talked to the poet, my role model, Tayamba Jess, on the phone a couple of days ago, and we were talking about poems, and he said of this poem I'm about to read, he said to me, Jericho, you wrote a poem that, I'm saying this because I was completely flattered, but also really upset by this. He said, you wrote a poem that people feel like they might need to carry around in their wallet. Bullet points. I will not shoot myself in the head, and I will not shoot myself in the back, and I will not hang myself with a trash bag. And if I do, I promise you, I will not do it in a police car while handcuffed, or in the jail cell of a town I only know the name of because I have to drive through it to get home. Yes, I may be at risk, but I promise you, I trust the maggots who live beneath the floorboards of my house to do what they must to any carcass, more than I trust an officer of the law of the land to shut my eyes like a man of God might, or to cover me with a sheet so clean my mother could have used it to tuck me in. When I kill me, I will do it the same way most Americans do. I promise you, cigarette smoke, or a piece of meat on which I choke, or so broke I freeze in one of these winters we keep calling worst. I promise if you hear of me dead anywhere near a cop, then that cop killed me. He took me from us and left my body, which is, no matter what we've been taught, greater than the settlement a city can pay a mother to stop crying, and more beautiful than the new bullet fished from the folds of my brain. Say thank you. Say I'm sorry. I don't know whose side you're on, but I'm here for the people who work in grocery stores that glow in the morning and close down for deep cleaning at night, right up the street, and in cities I mispronounce, in towns too tiny for my big black car to quit, and in every wide corner of Kansas where going to school means at least one field trip to a slaughterhouse. I want so little, another leather-bound book, a gimlet with a lavender gin, bread so good when I taste it, I can tell you how it's made. I'd like us to rethink what it is to be a nation. I'm in a mood about America today. I have PTSD about the Lord. God save the people who work in grocery stores. They know a bit of glamour is a lot of glamour. They know how much it costs for the eldest of us to eat. Save my loves and not my sentences. Before I see them, I draw a mole near my left dimple, add flair to the smile they can't see behind my mask. I grin or lie, or maybe I wear the mouth of a beast. I eat wild animals while some of us grow up knowing what gnocchi is. The people who work at the grocery store don't care. They say thank you. They say sorry. We don't sell motor oil anymore with a grief so thick you could touch it. Go on, touch it. It is early. It is late. They have washed their hands. They have washed their hands for you, and they take the bus home. Thank you.
Thank you, Jericho. That one's a new one, right? That was just in the New York Times. It was featured in the New York Times magazine weekends ago, right?
Yeah, my cousin who doesn't come to every reading is out there somewhere watching.
Hello, Jericho's cousin.
And he said, don't make me come to this reading unless you're going to read that poem. And I hadn't sent that poem, so I read it for my cousin.
So well, thank you for doing so. That's my first time to hear you read it as well. So it was a good suggestion from your cousin. What's his name?
His name's Vincent.
Hello, Vincent. Thank you. You know, I just want to also add that I think for all the pain and heartache that's in your poems, let me flatter you a little bit. I think what I most love about working with you is just the joy. That's what's, I think, incredibly contagious. Being in your presence is the joy that you bring to everything we do. And I think one of the times that I saw it most beautifully on display was at the National Book Awards. You know, I had the honor to sit at a table with you and with our next reader, Arthur Z. And when Arthur's name was announced as the winner, you were one of the very first people to leap out of your seat and start applauding. And I just thought that was so beautiful and generous, and I was grateful for that.
Michael, I was really glad because I told Arthur this, I really do love that book, but I was really mostly just excited that, you know, Grey Wolf lost.
We love our colleagues at Grey Wolf. They're wonderful. I'm glad that Arthur won as well. As I said, Arthur's our last reader, whose 2019 collection, Sightlines, won the National Book Award for Poetry. Arthur, I had the pleasure to first start working with Arthur right after I started at the press, nearly 26 years ago. We published his book Archipelago at that time, and we've since collaborated on 5 additional books. And I'm thrilled to say that we're going to be publishing his collected poems, The Glass Constellation, next year. In addition to Sightlines, we've published his translations in The Silk Dragon, and we'll be seeing some of those among his collected works. Over the years that I've known him, Arthur has always been a paragon of generosity, of kindness, and of wisdom. He's not only influenced me as an editor and a poetry reader, but he's mentored a couple generations of younger writers of color, particularly with his work in helping to create, teach at, and direct the creative writing program at the Institute of American Arts. He's a dear friend who I'm happy to work with in now our 3rd decade together, and I look forward to hearing him read for us tonight. Arthur, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. It's such a pleasure to be here, to be reading with Ellen and Jericho in this celebration of poetry. And I think of how many amazing books of poetry Copper Canyon Press has published over the years, and how we all sound so distinctly ourselves, and yet are part of this amazing group of poets. And I can think of no other publishing house that is so passionate and passionately committed to publishing poetry. My first poem is called Black Center. Green tips of tulips are rising out of the earth. You don't cleanse a whale or fire at beer cans in an arroyo, but catch the budding tips of pear branches and wonder what it's like to live along the purling edge of spring. Jefferson once tried to assemble a mastodon skeleton on the White House floor, but with pieces missing, failed to sequence the bones. When the last speaker of a language dies, a hue vanishes from the spectrum of visible light. Last night, you sped past revolving and flashing red, blue, and white lights along the road, a wildfire in the dark. Though no one you knew was taken in the midnight ambulance, an arrow struck a bullseye and quivered in its shaft. 1 minute gratitude rises like water from an underground lake. Another, dissolution gnaws from a black center. First snow. A rabbit has stopped on the gravel driveway. Imbibing the silence, you stare at spruce needles. There's no sound of a leaf blower, no sign of a black bear. A few weeks ago, a buck scraped his rack against an aspen trunk. A carpenter scribed a plank along a curved stone wall. You only spot the rabbit's ears and tail. When it moves, you locate it against speckled gravel, but when it stops, it blends in again. The world of being is like this gravel. You think you own a car, a house, this blue zigzag shirt, but you just borrow these things. Yesterday, you constructed an aqueduct of dreams and stood at Gibraltar, but you possess nothing. Snow melts into a pool of clear water, and in this stillness, starlight behind daylight, wherever you gaze. As Michael mentioned, I taught for many years at the Institute of American Indian Arts. And for so many Native tribes in the Southwest, salt and the journey to collect salt is a sacred journey. For instance, the Hopi Indians have a very special trail that goes into the Grand Canyon. I was thinking of the Zuni Indians in Western New Mexico, who also have a very special and sacred trail. This is in the voice of Salt Song. Zunis make shrines on the way to a lake where I emerge, and Miwoks gather me out of pools along the Pacific. The cheetah thirsts for me, and when you sprinkle me on ribeye, you have no idea how I balance silence with thunder in crystal. You dream of butterfly hunting in Madagascar, spelunking through caves echoing with dripping stalactites. And you don't see how I yearn to shimmer an orange aurora against flame. Look at me in your hand. In Egypt, I scrub the bodies of kings and queens. In Pakistan, I zigzag upward through 26 miles of tunnels before drawing my first breath in sunlight. If you heat a kiln to 2,380 degrees and scatter me inside, I vaporize and bond with clay. In this unseen moment, a potter prays because my pattern is out of his hands. And when I touch your lips, you salivate. And when I dissolve on your tongue, your hair rises, ozone unlocks. A single stroke of lightning sizzles to earth. And this last poem is a new poem. It's in one-line stanzas. It's called Transpirations. Leafing branches of a backyard plum. Branches of water on a dissolving ice sheet. Chatter of magpies when you approach. Lilacs lean over the road weighted with purple blossoms. Then the noon sun shimmers the grasses. You ride the surge into summer. smell of pinon crackling in the fireplace, blue notes of a saxophone in the air, not by sand running through an hourglass, but by our bodies igniting, passing in the form of vapors from a living body. This world of orange sunlight and wildfire haze, world of iron filings pulled toward magnetic south and north, pool of quicksilver when you bend to tie your shoes, standing, you well up with glistening eyes. Have you lived with utmost care? Have you articulated emotions like the edges of leaves? Adjusting your breath to the seasonal rhythm of grasses, gazing into a lake on a salt flat and drinking in reflection the Milky Way. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. That was beautiful. I was just considering how much I've learned from your poems and from you over the years. I mean, so be it the language of Kipu, or the salt of the Zuni, or just from our many walks together, where you've showed me what happens in a cave at solstice or what have you. I just love the intelligence you bring to my life through your poems. And I thought that now, while we have the three of you, your brilliant minds and open hearts gathered here, I wanted to maybe talk with each of you amongst ourselves about the present moment, and maybe a little bit about the future of poetry, and maybe to start a kind of softball question. And I'm wondering if each of you find yourselves writing more or less during these times. I think there's the assumption that we all have extra time on our hands, and I know particularly with each of you, you've got some busy things happening with media, with health concerns, and family concerns. I'm wondering if you can maybe tell me what is going on in your writing lives during these days, and maybe we'll again go in alphabetical order. Ellen, maybe you could start off for us.
Sure. This time has been more about sharing poetry and teaching and reading and being able to connect across the distances through poetry, which has been so meaningful to me and to so many other people. And it's really just in the last little bit of time that I've started to have time to write again. And it's been very exciting to just have that challenge of being with the blank page again and have some time in the last few days. So I'm looking forward to, I know there's a lot of people who have felt like they had too much time on their hands, but I'm really looking forward to having more time on my hands as the next couple of months come.
Right. Yeah, I think I spoke with you yesterday, and you were saying that you were on day 17 of Zoom classes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, we
yeah.
thank you again for coming and joining us on screen yet again. And I know it's similar for you, Jericho. You've been on a lot of Zoom readings and what have you. And I'm wondering, are you writing? Clearly, you have the new poem that was just published in the New York Times, and wondering what else you've been working on.
I've been writing essays, or maybe mini essays, often by assignment. I wrote after the death of after the murder of George Floyd. I wrote an opinion piece that will become more of an essay unto itself for The Guardian. I wrote a piece for the New York Times about pride, and how we'll celebrate pride in the midst of the pandemic. And I'm always, although I don't feel like it, I had to be in a relationship to find out. I was one of these people who was always complaining that I never get any writing done. And then I finally got a boyfriend, and he was happy to tell me that I was writing all the time and that I was making us late for everywhere we had to go because I was busy writing. So there's a way that, you know, you're at a point with your poems where you feel like you're writing, and before you get to that point, you only feel like you're scribbling or pushing lines around. And the older I get, the more I'm beginning to understand that that too is writing. So I'm always doing something, though I don't feel like I am right now. I know that I spend some time with some lines in front of the computer daily, but I wouldn't call that writing necessarily. We'll see.
So, and Arthur, I know that you're not one for social media, so you don't spend a lot of time in that world. I'm just curious, you know, are you writing more? Do you have more time, or is this the season, I imagine, when that acequia above your house is flowing and you're probably charged with tending to that?
Well, I guess I would start by saying I don't know that there's such thing as extra time. I think the time is more precious than ever. Yes, I'm involved in this irrigation ditch, this association. It's called the Acequia del Llano, which for those of you who don't know northern New Mexico, there are a series of ditch irrigation associations that are really the lifeblood of agriculture of northern New Mexico. And there are 15 families on this particular ditch. I'm one of the 3 commissioners. So with social distancing, we actually cleaned out the ditch on April 15th. It's running 24/7, but we have water rights from, you know, Sunday at 5 in the morning to Monday at 5 in the morning, and Thursday from 5 in the evening to Friday at 5 in the morning. So actually, my connection to the land has been a real source of strength and comfort. And so at 5 in the morning, I'm literally walking uphill a quarter of a mile to drop a gate into the irrigation ditch. And then as the water level rises, it comes down these pipes, and we have an apple orchard, and you know, there's a lot of things to do with the land. So that kind of connection is important to me, but I have this rhythm of getting up really early in the morning. And I think with you know, with what we're all going through, I just feel the time is being so much more precious. I don't know that I'm actually spending more time writing, but I think I'm spending more time just brooding, just poking around, looking, observing nature, going about my day, but thinking more deeply maybe.
So Jericho and Ellen, are you doing the same thing? Are you tending to your land, to your gardens? I know, Jericho, you're a gardener, and Ellen, I heard your chickens clucking in the background the other day. Are you spending a lot of time getting some dirt under your fingernails?
No. I was like, I wish I could tell Arthur's story. I can't wait till my next reading so I can say that I did everything Arthur said that he did. No, I haven't been. What I've really been doing is, what I'll do is I'll make a sort of task for myself, and then I try to complete that task within a certain amount of time, which is generally what I do every summer anyway. It's just different because I don't have the world to push me into that task in the same way. So the brooding that Arthur is talking about for me is often an escape from, oh, I got to go to dinner with this person, or I'm supposed to meet that person, or I got to go pick this up at the store. And the escape from that has been the brooding. And lately it's been a lot of escape. So I've sort of changed the parameters of what I can make my goals. So my goal, for instance, might be watch all of The Wire, which I think right now for me is a pretty lofty goal because it tells me a lot about narrative in ways that I otherwise would not have thought about it, you know, visually. So I'm just sort of changing things. I'm reading with my friend, the poet Tarfia Faizullah. We're rereading all of Gwendolyn Brooks together. So things like that are more the kinds of thing that's happening rather than things with the natural world. Although I keep my eyes on it, obviously.
My wife is a mad gardener this summer, and so I'm living in a lot of beauty, but I'm often here in what she calls my cave, and she says things like, "It's a sin if you don't come out and eat some of these blueberries," and so I do, and. But I plan to do a lot more of that. Our apricots are just coming in, and we had a big, beautiful old apricot tree that finally, after many decades, it was here before we moved in, and we've been here for over 30 years. And so it was an old tree then, but finally died. And we planted a new tree 2 years ago, and the tree is like so happy. It knows that there was another apricot tree there before, because it has grown more in 2 years than I've ever seen a tree grow. So we're getting our first apricots this week, and so I'm eating a lot. I'm not gardening, but I'm really eating. And I know, Michael, you're a big cook and marvelous eater. I can't wait until I can eat some of your food. It just doesn't seem fair that you've never made me a dinner.
Well, you'll when we can all travel again, we'll make that happen. You know, I look forward to breaking bread with all of you, maybe at the same table at the same time. Okay, I wanted to ask you also, you know, a little more about poetry in general. We're living in uncertain times right now and facing extraordinary changes. And I'm wondering if each of you might talk about what role you think poetry plays in times of uncertainty and change. Do you see poetry more as a language of certainty or a language of uncertainty, or how is it both? And maybe this time we'll work in reverse order. And Arthur, can you maybe talk a little bit about how you see poetry in these times?
Well, I think we need poetry now more than ever. I mean, I think it, yes, has certainty and it has uncertainty, but it interests me that, you know, historically people turn to poetry under times of difficulty, times of stress. It's a way of, and it's a paradox, because you may read a poem by yourself thinking, oh, this is a solitary act, and yet it's amazing how poetry brings so many people together too. So that sense of sort of certainty and uncertainty, that sense of isolation or solitude, and then that sense of community and communion and connection to the world, it does all of that. So I think poetry is really crucial and essential right now. I mean, I can politicize it and say, with our current climate and the way there's such an erosion with language and care and attention, I feel like we as poets have a special responsibility to make very clear and, you know, to show that commitment to language and to emotion and intellect and just the whole force that we can put behind language, and that intensification and purification. We have our work cut out for us, and we need poetry now more than ever. And I think people turn to poetry in these times of crisis. And here's an example right now this evening. I didn't expect a lot of people to tune in, but I guess there's a lot of people who are listening in tonight.
Yeah, there are nearly 1,000 of us out here tonight watching you guys. So yes, but so Jericho,
I'll agree with what Arthur said, and just say that it isn't new, and I'm always taken aback when readers and poets pretend that it is. You know, we've had certain things happen in this nation, you know, in just the last, let's say 5 years, you know, 2 or 3 years. And it's always been quite heartbreaking to hear people I think of as my, you know, my compatriots and my comrades say that they're surprised by these things. But these are the same people who have read Adrienne Rich and Allen Ginsberg and Langston Hughes and Muriel Rukeyser. I don't see how you read Muriel Rukeyser and end up surprised by much of anything else afterward. What I hope my poems, though I don't think about this when I'm writing my poems, but I hope that my poems tell the truth, because I feel like that's what I got from those people's poems when I needed it most desperately, which was, you know, every day since I was 19, you know, and coming across those people's poems little by little changed my life, changed how I was able to see myself, changed how I was able to relate to other people who I knew and loved and people I would never meet. And I think that's the work of poetry, because what we do with language that is not just a common language. It is a particularized and practiced and perfected language. And because we're doing this particularized, practiced, and perfected thing, we can get at the truth in a way that, you know, grocery store chatter in the line or even the chatter over the dinner table with your loved ones might not be able to get at the truth. And I think that's what I'm supposed to be doing, and I think that's what we do when we are at our best.
So, Ellen, you care to weigh in?
Sure. Thank you both for what you're saying about poetry, which is very beautiful and very real to me. I think, you know, the place where poetry starts is with a kind of paying attention and really trying to pay attention. And there is not enough of that in so much of the world. So I think that's the first thing we're trying to do. And then we're trying to put that into, as both Jericho and Arthur are talking about, into language in which we can say things that are what they really are, which other people have, so many other writers have talked about this, but trying to say the unsayable, trying to say what if we reduce it to that grocery line or kitchen table talk is often reducing it to where it isn't really what is true. It isn't really what we mean. So we're trying to find language for that, those expressions that are more nuanced than that, more complicated, more complex. And we know when we hear it because something in us resonates with it. And I think that's part of why people turn to it in difficult times, is because in really difficult times, the just going along on the surface doesn't give us enough nourishment. We need something deeper and richer than that to sustain us. And that kind of sustenance, I think, is what people turn to poetry for, as well as for courage. We hear poems that speak out in a really brave way, and that gives us courage to either tell the truth about our own lives or to live our lives differently, or to face what we have to face. That one person speaking from the inside of their own life in a context of the world that they're living in, we hear that and we're just one person listening. It's such an intimate art form. Even when it's in a big group, it's one person speaking to one person, and that we need that intimacy all the time, not just when we're in a pandemic. We need it so badly. And it always astounds me how I'll read something from a poet who lived before I was born in a different country across the world, and who could never have imagined that there's going to be some, old-ish lesbian woman in Santa Cruz, California, holding on to that poem for dear life, through the night. And yet here we are. And I'm as close to that person as I could possibly be, because they're saying something that I need so much.
Something you said there reminds me of the idea that books begin and end in isolation. So they begin with the isolation of the poet writing in solitude, and then end with the person reading in solitude. And I think one of the things that we value at Copper Canyon is, obviously we value you as poets, but we also value the readers. And knowing that each of you has a distinct writing practice, I'm curious about what your reading practice is. So when you sit down to read a poem, are you looking to feel something, to be entertained, to steal from fellow poets? What are some of the things that you turn to poetry to bring? You've already answered some of it, but I'm curious if you can each talk maybe a little bit about your reading practice.
I'll start, because if we keep doing alphabetical back and forth, I guess I think I sort of mentioned I'll create projects for myself because there's something I haven't done or seen, so, and often it'll be a big thing, or, I'll say, okay, Yeats, I'll realize I've read some Yeats poems, but not really read Yeats's complete works. And so I want to get through that, and I want to know it, and I want to have it. Or more recently, I'll say, okay, Audre Lorde, and then I'll read everything that I can of Audre Lorde, which gets really interesting, particularly when you start looking at the essays along with the poems that she's written. But sometimes, I read a book because it's new and it's by a poet I want to read, or because it was recommended to me by someone else. And often I'll find that there are certain poets in the world, when Dinez's book came out, I read it the day it came out. So, like if a book comes out, I gotta know, like, what are you doing? So that's sort of how I get it done. I just, I try to make sure I'm getting some reading done in a daily way. Yeah. It's interesting, thinking about this during the pandemic is interesting because for a long time, I wasn't able to do that. And I figured out, I had this interest in poems, poem by poem, but I didn't want to sit down with a book. And I couldn't sit down with a book because I kept having to face myself. When you read a book of poetry, if the book's any good, then you have to deal with yourself, which is really interesting. And I think this thing you were saying about beginning in solitude and ending in solitude, and the thing that Ellen was saying about the one-to-one that poetry creates, is something else to think about in the midst of this pandemic. Sometimes, and I have these conversations with my students. Sometimes I will find that my students can be there for everybody. Generally, if they have a class, they're there on time. If they got to pick somebody up, they're there on time. But when it's time to get your own reading and writing done, you don't have time. And that's because you think there's something wrong with you. It's like you could be there for anybody else at any given time, if on schedule and on, sometimes people are 10 minutes late. But when it's time to be there for you in a room by yourself, it's very difficult to do. Sometimes because you can't stand yourself. And once I realized that I was acting like a person who couldn't stand himself, I got a lot more reading done, because I was like, oh, I gotta love me. I gotta do better than that. So, yeah.
That's beautiful. So Arthur or Ellen, what are your reading practices?
I'm a very slow reader, so and undisciplined. I jump around a lot, and I'm just personalizing it here. But just a few evenings ago, I was restless and wanted to read something different, and I picked Paul Celan's late poems off the bookshelf, and they're very short and enigmatic, and I just loved reading. I don't know any German, but I was just reading translations in English, and just the sense of being fractured and being slightly tortured, or made me just think again about how I like poems that I don't quite understand, and or at least for a long, long time, that I have to keep coming back with and struggling with. And maybe that's why I'm a slow reader, but I'd rather spend more time with some poems that sort of sink in deeply. And Jericho was mentioning Yeats, and I remember, some of those late poems of Yeats, not understanding Byzantium at all, but just being, hearing that rhythm and that sound behind his language, making me just, again, I couldn't, intellectually, I couldn't with my intelligence understand the poem, and yet the poem was communicating to me and it was pulling me in. And to me, that's, something that was there at the beginning, and 50 years later, I'm just as excited about it. I feel like I'm a beginner as a writer, I'm a beginner as a reader of poetry, and that sense of not quite understanding, or that poem that is somehow resisting that kind of easy read and intelligibility. I love that. It keeps pulling me back, and it makes me expand and stretch, and ultimately it has a kind of, I would call, a deep or essential surprise to it too. And that's something I love about poetry.
I love what you say, Arthur, about loving something that you don't understand. I think I started loving poetry when I was just a kid, and I had no life experience that would lead me to love some of the poems that I loved. I don't know what it was, but I think it's exactly what you're talking about, that just being pulled into the tide of those rhythms, and that that sense that I knew there was something there, even if I didn't understand what was there, and I wanted to find out about it. And I don't think I felt a sense of, I think I was pretty good back then with, Keats's ability that being negative capability, because I don't think I felt like I had to understand it. I just wanted to be near it. I just wanted to be with it. And I love you talking about that, because it brings me back to that. I've been reading in a really haphazard way through this whole time, in part because I've been just more public than I usually am. And so a lot of my energy has been doing that. But I've also had a great time, because I've been teaching so much, I've had a great time looking for poems that illustrate things that I want to be teaching. And so, like, normally when I'd make a packet of poems for a workshop to illustrate something, maybe I'd have 3 or 4 poems. And I found myself having like 25 poems, and, and because no one is printing, I don't have to print them out for everybody. I'd be giving people these packets of poems, oh, we're going to talk about metaphor. Well, here's 30 poems. And I just kind of gotten carried away. But the great part is that nobody minds. Everybody goes, oh, thanks for these packets. So that I feel like it's been so much fun to introduce developing poets to writers that they're not familiar with, or poems of those writers they're not familiar with. So we've been in a great time of discovery and poem sharing. And the other thing I've been doing a little bit more is learning some more poems by heart, because I love that feeling of having a poem inside my body and being able to say it to myself whenever I want to, and also discovering things about the poem that way that I would never have discovered, even teaching it over and over, or reading it over and over, until I start to try and learn it and see where I forget, and how the poet moves from one thing to another so that I can remember it. lets me in more deeply into the poem.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, yeah, again, that idea of starting and ending in isolation, what I love about that when we're reading manuscripts or books at the press, where I think you used the term, or maybe Arthur did, of being pulled through. We're being pulled through all these communities from around, the world, different perspectives, and the act of a book, for me is, while it's so engaged, and particularly in these pandemic times, in acts of isolation, it's also such a communal act that I really treasure. I'm going to ask if each of you can indulge us with one last poem before we close the evening. And this time we're going to go in reverse alphabetical order. And so, Arthur, I'm hoping you can start us off.
Sure, my pleasure. This poem is called Cloud Hands. A woman moves through a cloud hands position, holding and rotating an invisible globe. Thud, shattering glass, moan, horn blast. So many worlds to this world. Two men dip net sockeye salmon at the mouth of a river. From a rooftop, a seagull squawks and cries. A woman moves through, grasp the bird's tail. Someone on a stretcher is wheeled past glass doors. A desert 5-spot rises in a wash, and pressing her tongue to the roof of her mouth, she focuses in the near distance on the music of sycamore leaves.
Duplex. I begin with love, hoping to end there. I don't want to leave a messy corpse. I don't want to leave a messy corpse full of medicines that turn in the sun. Some of my medicines turn in the sun. Some of us don't need hell to be good. Those who need most need hell to be good. What are the symptoms of your sickness? Here is one symptom of my sickness. Men who love me are men who miss me. Men who leave me are men who miss me in the dream where I am an island. In the dream where I am an island, I grow green with hope. I'd like to end there.
The world has need of you. And this begins with an epigraph from Rainer Maria Rilke. Everything here seems to need us. The world has need of you. I can hardly imagine it as I walk to the lighthouse, feeling the ancient prayer of my arms swinging in counterpoint to my feet. Here I am, suspended between the sidewalk and twilight, the sky dimming so fast it seems alive. What if you felt the invisible tug between you and everything? A boy on a bicycle rides by, his white shirt open, flaring behind him like wings. It's a hard time to be human. We know too much and too little. Does the breeze need us? The cliffs, the gulls? If you've managed to do one good thing, the ocean doesn't care. But when Newton's apple fell toward the earth, ever so slightly, fell toward the apple.
Thank you, all three of you. I want to take a moment also to thank everybody who's been out there joining us this evening. And I want to ask a couple of favors of you. First of all, I hope from wherever you are watching us that you will, quietly, since everyone's muted, I'm sorry, thank and applaud these poets for the work that they do and for reading for us tonight. Through their many voices and and aesthetics and joys and pains, we're seeing the power of poetry to build and hold community. We've just seen a small slice of the many imaginations that affirm the mission of Copper Canyon Press. And it's really not hyperbolic nor canned gratitude on my part. When I say that none of this is possible, I mean literally none of it is possible without donors like all of you who are out there supporting us. It's been a tremendous year for Copper Canyon Press, and it's also been a heartbreaking one for us. We've won the National Book Award, we've won the Pulitzer Prize, or I should say our authors have won those awards, and we've been privileged and honored to be alongside them. We've had numerous finalists for awards and received a tremendous amount of coverage for our authors, thanks to the good work of Laura Bucieri, who you saw at the beginning in our video, and getting critical attention and acclaim for writers. In just the past year, I started looking at the poets we've published, and I'm absolutely thrilled at the work that has come across our doorstep, be it Sarah Rule or Monica Sook or Ed Skoog or Natalie Center-Sapico. And I'm going fast here, I know, because we've had an extraordinary year full of great books. Heather McHugh, who just received a wonderful review in the New York Times yesterday, or I'm sorry, on Sunday, I don't know what day it is. Alberto Rios, Jim Richardson, and on and on and on. Deborah Landau, I know I've got more here. Matthew Sapruder, the list goes on, and it's just we're so honored at Copper Canyon to be able to publish all these amazing poets. But I have to say that this pandemic has been maybe the biggest threat to our viability that we've faced in 48 years. Bookstores have closed, book tours have been canceled, our fundraisers have been canceled, the publishing world and the nonprofit worlds have been upended. The national movement for racial equality has been inspiring to all of us, but it is also undoubtedly a challenge to both our authors and our staff. And yet, while there's a heightened pain and uncertainty that we're all sharing during these days, the language of poetry is one place where we can turn to for connection and empowerment. Our poets lift us up at Copper Canyon Press, and our hope is that our community will continue to sustain us as well. Through your generosity, you too can claim ownership of our mission, a mission which foregrounds putting extraordinary books of poetry into the world, and a mission which believes in the power of poetry to make us all better at living. So I hope you'll take a moment to make a gift to the press. In the chat box, there's a link that you can turn to, or you can go to our website to make a gift. And I want to say at the start of the evening, I mentioned that we've put together an anthology of the poems from Copper Canyon poets that have gotten all of us on our staff and our board of directors through these times. And for those who give at the $100 level, we will be sending you a copy of that book. So we hope that you'll be able to support us. If the link in your chat window doesn't work, you can also open your web browser and type bit.ly/forpoetry. Again, that's bit.ly/forpoetry. Or you can find, again, the link in the chat box of our of Zoom. But again, I'm going to turn it over to our poets, who always can say it much better than I can. And so here are a few videos that our poets sent to us over the past few weeks, sending sweet notes to us from their quarantine spots all over the country, specifically to thank all of you, our donors. Stay safe, stay kind.
I love so much about Copper Canyon, but probably the thing that I'm most in awe of is how committed this press is to finding a wide-ranging, diverse set of voices from so many different backgrounds. My 2018 book of poetry was published with Copper Canyon. It's called Oceanic, and it's just been such a joy to get their support and to help bring it out into this world.
And one of the first books of poetry that I ever received in college was Ruth Stone's In the Next Galaxy, which was a National Book Award winner published by Copper Canyon Press. I received it from a Borders, if people remember this sticker. Borders, the chain bookstore, is no longer in business, but Copper Canyon is still continuing to publish award-winning, phenomenal poets. This is one of my most cherished possessions, and many, many years later, I was so blessed and honored to have my first collection of poetry, Library of Small Catastrophes, be published with Copper Canyon. I love Copper Canyon Press. I am so grateful that they believed in me.
Copper Canyon Press has published exceptional poetry for 48 years. This is my latest book, Sightlines, which received the National Book Award in 2019. I am so grateful to Copper Canyon Press for publishing my work over 25 years. I've published 7 books with the press. All of my poetry is represented here, and I feel like I have a home, and the staff are just amazing. They believe in not just my work, they believe in how poetry is a vital force in our culture today.
I just want to say that Copper Canyon Press has given me tremendous support as a debut author and published my first book earlier this year. I'm super happy that it's out in the world, and I'm also just so grateful that poetry brings people together. Please support Copper Canyon Press.
You know, a dictionary is efficient, but a poem is effective, articulating our greater common need to speak eloquently with each other. I'm Alberto Rios. This is my latest book from Copper Canyon Press. Not Go Away is my name. To Copper Canyon Press, I want to say thank you. Copper Canyon Press is poetry.
So again, thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. Thank you, Ellen, Arthur, Jericho. We love you. We're grateful for you. Have a good night. And please join me in going to our donation page to make a contribution to Copper Canyon Press. Thank you, guys.